Good evening, everybody, and we are starting a new chapter tonight, chapter 21, which is the imperfect indicative. And we'll be studying both the active, middle, and passive voices. It's a fairly easy chapter, in my opinion. It's new information, but it's readily understandable. And the use of the imperfect tense in Greek is really, well, he uses the term versatile. It's very often, I think, expresses some very interesting truth in the imperfect tense. As we get into it, you'll see. But there's a very good exegetical insight that Mounts has here. And I think I'd like to ask maybe Ray, would you read it for us?
So, the Greek imperfect tense is both limited and versatile in its usage. It is limited in that it only occurs in the indicative mood, but in that mood, it has some interesting nuances of meaning. Basically, the imperfect expresses linear action in past time.
Excuse me, let me interrupt. He uses the term linear. That's pretty much a synonym for continuous action.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I think of linear in this case as sequential, but that doesn't.
No.
Sequential doesn't necessarily mean.
No, but we have noticed the difference between undefined action or simple action and continuous action. So linear, the way he's using it there, means continuous action.
Continuous or ongoing.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm going to make the new before I continue reading.
All right.
Uses this term to mean continuous or ongoing action.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Mounts in this edition introduced the terms imperfective and perfective. Imperfective means the same. I prefer the term continuous. It's not completed.
In our English grammar, we would describe imperfect as being an ongoing or continuing action.
I don't really like those terms imperfective and perfective, but I'd rather use the continuous and undefined.
Yeah, I would agree that continuous or ongoing are more clear.
Mm-hmm. All right.
If you can misinterpretation.
Continue then.
That action may be repetitive, prolonged, or just beginning. Sometimes, however, the imperfect expresses repeated attempts. So I guess in that case, he's saying something with a definite beginning and ending, followed by the same thing again with a definitive beginning and ending. And,
interrupted and repetitive.
Or failed and then reattempted or something.
Yeah.
Okay. This is true in Galatians 1:13, where Paul says, "For you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it." Both verbs in the second clause of this verse are imperfects. The first one,
diokon,
simply expresses the repeated action in the past. Paul is saying that he often persecuted the church, in other words, in multiple occasions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The second one,
eporthun,
is tendential, i.e., it expresses attempted action. This is why the NIV adds the word tried, in other words, attempted, which does not occur in the Greek. Paul repeatedly persecuted the church, but his violent acts did not, indeed could not, destroy it. His actions were only attempts, and feeble ones at that. Jesus' promise about his church was true then as it is now. The gates of Hades will not overcome it.
Isn't that kind of neat the way you can use a tense like that and a context to get the idea of how to translate it?
Yes.
And that word tendential, it's a term, we get our word tendency from that. Or, I mean, it's the same stem, but attempts to do
Okay, that's
something.
interesting. So the verb there means to destroy. And it's
Dioko means to destroy, but the epsilon in front of it is what's called an augment. He'll explain that in just a minute.
okay. And so we have no, I just well in my head. Tie is the and or something to that effect, right?
What is?
So we don't have the trying in there. We just
No.
have something like chi or some other conjunction.
Possibly. I don't see
Yeah.
the text there. But...
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on.
I tell you what, there's something here that, in this particular thing, and this is, it's off his point, so I'm not looking for an answer now.
All
But
right.
if we come to this later on, I'd like to take a look at what it says in the Greek when we've got the time and it's.
All right.
And the proper vocabulary and grammar for it. But I saw a number of years ago, a pastor who was suggesting that the phrase that we look at, the gates of hell will not overcome it, that we think of it backwards to the way it really should be intended. And that is because if you take a look at the gates of any sort of thing, whether it be a castle, a fortified city, a fortress, or whatever, it's an entirely defensive structure. In other words, the gates aren't going to go out and
They're not
attack
attacking.
anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So while we tend to think when we read this of Satan coming to attack us and he's not going to be able to knock us down, the idea that Jesus was telling the disciples was more on the order of when you go out bringing the gospel, and you're doing my work, Satan's forces are not going to be able to prevail and stop you. You'll be able to overrun them.
Yeah.
Well,
essentially, I think you're saying that the gospel messengers are on the offensive.
Right. And so anyway, that's, I'm not looking for an answer to that now, but if I would love to, if we come to it sometime, really look into the sense that it looks like in the Greek.
All right. Sounds good.
Sure.
All right. You got a comment?
Well, no, I'm only thinking of the full armor of God, and none of that is about offense.
Except the
Sword of the
sword of the
We
spirit.
have the sword of spirit, and that is the word of God to speak the words of truth. And that's what we have. And so how do we understand the gates? I mean, this is a long
Totally
thing.
different passage in a
Because we're
different
talking about
context.
spiritual things, not physical
Yeah.
things. And it's not a matter of going somewhere. If I'm speaking the word of God, then Satan cannot stand up against the word of God. If Adam, dare I say, if Adam and Eve had stood on the word of God, then the devil would have gone away.
Yeah. That's a moot point because
Well, yeah, but I
no
mean,
second chance.
but this is what we have, and indeed, but the gates of hell are wherever they are. They're not a place we go to. It's spiritual.
Right.
If the devil
it's
is in this
metaphorical.
situation and we're speaking the truth of the word of God, yes, we're doing that. But
This is a metaphor or an analogy.
yeah, it is. But I'm just trying. We need to think clearly what that is. We're not sending ourselves. I'm just thinking. It's not like we're an army out going invading. We are. Yeah, it's interesting, but I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
sure.
a
We're not
certain
going to hell to try to take it over.
No,
That's not what we're doing.
not that.
Yeah.
But the only reason I bring that up is I don't know whether that pastor's point is accurate or not. And so if we ever come to it in the Greek, I would
Okay.
love to.
Well, let's defer it till another
That's
time,
okay.
like you said.
So if we do come to it, that's a question that I've got for whenever we're
Yeah.
ready for it.
But I tell you what we might want to do is each one of us do a little studying on it and see what we can come up with when we get together again on that subject. Because you've got quite a few tools now. You can dig things out. But let's go on. The overview. In this chapter, you'll learn that the imperfect tense indicates imperfective or continuous action that usually occurs in the past. And he says usually because there's a few times when you can't translate it that way. that the imperfect tense is formed with an augment, then the present tense stem, then a connecting vowel, and secondary personal endings. We've not seen secondary personal endings yet. The present tense and the future tense use primary personal endings. We'll also learn that an augment is a prefix indicating past time. If the verb begins with a consonant, then the augment is an epsilon. Lu is the root and the present tense stem of luo. Putting the augment in front of the stem results in eluon, with the appropriate case ending. If the verb begins with a vowel, the augment is the lengthened vowel. Example is agapa, which is both the present tense stem and the root of agapao. And to lengthen that alpha, it becomes an eta, agapon. Then we'll also learn that secondary active and passive endings, the two final sets of personal endings. All right, so that's what's in this chapter.
Yeah.
In English, there's only one simple past tense. However, its aspect can either be undefined, perfective. Now see, he's using the preferable term there, undefined, or continuous, imperfective. For example, Ed studied last night, but I was studying until the early hours of the morning. So studied is undefined, or simple is another term you could use. Was studying is continuous in past time. The past imperfective active is formed by using the past tense of the helping verb was. Now this is English. So the helping verb was is used in the singular, or were for the plural, in the present participial form of the verb. That is the ing form of the verb. I was studying. The passive in English uses the same helping verb, but adds the present participle being and the past participle of the main verb. I was being studied. So was is the helping verb, being is what's indicating the passive voice, and studied is the past participle that of that verb, and altogether it's the passive continuous form of the English. We're familiar with it. I mean, we use it all the time. But,
So if I'm following this, then essentially the augment is functioning to perform the same, it's working to perform the same function as our helping.
yeah. Now I want to remind you, in the back of the book, he's got a really neat section on English grammar of verbs, showing all the forms available. It's the index here. I'm looking at it. English verb tenses, page 427. You might need to refresh your memory on that, but it's arranged. The top four rows are they're past tenses. The middle four rows are present tenses, and the bottom four rows are future tenses. And then the three columns, past simple, past progressive, and past perfect. So just a reminder. Now in Greek, there are two past tenses. The names of those tenses are imperfect, which we're studying tonight, and aorist, which is chapter 23, I believe. Greek also can describe an action occurring in the past, but the difference is that it uses different tenses for different aspects. This is a new thing. It's the present tense, combine them both. We had to make a decision whether to use the undefined or the continuous form of the present. But in the past, the imperfect, one of the two past tenses, that decision is made for us. If it's in the imperfect, it's continuous action. If it's in the aorist, it's undefined action. Does that make sense?
Sure, I know what I'm reading. So we've talked about here both tenses in the English. So this discussion now about the imperfect indicative will be,
For the Greek tense.
yes, this imperfect tense will be for
Continuous action
continuous action.
in past time.
Okay. So the English translation then is such as was studying.
Yes. That's
Okay,
right.
that's what this chapter is about.
That's what this
Okay,
chapter is about. Okay, the imperfect tense describes an imperfective or continuous action usually occurring in the past. There's a few exceptions where you can't translate it that way. While the aorist, chapter 22, okay, that's the next chapter, describes a perfective or
Okay.
what's the other term? Perfective
Simple?
action usually
Simple?
occurring in the past. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, does that mean simple? I'm sorry,
Simple, yes.
simple?
Yes.
Okay.
The difference between I studied and I was studying. The aorist would be translated I studied.
The simple English past.
Yes.
In English, that's just the past.
Just a past, simple past.
I'm just wondering about the way we name these tenses here.
Yeah, and it's
really
not consistent.
not easy.
Yeah.
No, and
It could be
yeah, I
easier.
agree with you, the terminology is too similar.
And not,
Yeah.
I mean,
Imperfective action is not the same as the imperfect tense.
And that's really an unfortunate.
I'm just looking at this, and so in my notes, what I want to say about what we're calling the imperfect indicative is this is the past tense.
It's continuous action in past.
So we would call in English, we call that something else. We call that
Past-
imperfect past. No, we don't call it. There's actually something that they taught us in English.
Past progressive is one.
There was something called past perfect. There was something called past
Yeah,
perfect.
there's a past perfect tense, but that's a different thing than
What's past
than what-
perfect tense?
I had studied.
Okay, and I don't know what they said when there was
Present
something.
perfect is I have studied. Past perfect is I had studied.
I have studied.
But that's not the imperfect
I
tense we're
was
studying now.
studying. I don't know what that was called in English.
Well, he's got the names of them in that what I just showed you in the appendix.
He's got, yeah, all right.
Can we go on?
Yeah.
Okay, the aorist, chapter 22, describes I'm going to call it an undefined action, usually occurring in the past, or you could say simple. Agapon is imperfect, imperfective aspect, or continuous aspect, meaning I was loving. Agapesa is aorist, perfective aspect, or undefined aspect, or simple aspect, meaning I loved. So the difference we've got here is between I was loving and I loved, or I was studying and I studied.
Okay.
Chapter 22 will be the aorist tense. Okay, here's what he says about the augment. The Greek verb indicates past time by prefixing a morpheme. Now that the morpheme, we talked about that once. It's a simple element, a part of the verb. The morpheme is called an augment.
Right, and if I remember correctly from when we discussed this originally, A morpheme could be either a prefix or a suffix.
Yes, or it could be, yeah, I guess that, yes. There's also something we'll get later in the perfect tense called reduplication, which is another prefix. But let's wait until we get to that. But a morpheme is a particle of the verb. And well, let's go on here. It is added to the beginning of luo in the paradigm 21.7. It is the augment luo and the epsilon added to the front with a smooth reading becomes eluon. It is roughly equivalent to adding ed to the end of the English verb. Kick in past tense is kicked. So English adds the ed ending to indicate past time.
But
But
this augment is for the imperfect indicative, yes?
yes.
So
But
it's actually not like kicked because that's not the right tense. It's more like I was kicking.
okay.
I'm sorry, this is
I
hard.
didn't express it very well, Dave.
No, you're not. No, this is exactly what he said.
Yeah.
And I'm just questioning that because
Well, see,
that's actually not the tense we're talking about.
no, but
Okay, I'm sorry.
that same augment is also used in the aorist where we do have.
That's fine,
Yeah.
but this is confusing because he's talking about two different things at once. And
Yeah.
so yeah, pardon me, but okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The augment simply indicates past time, just like
Well,
our
okay.
ed does. Now,
In some cases. Yeah.
yeah. Now, English has irregular verbs that don't use the ed
Okay.
ending,
Mhm.
like I slept.
I mean, I looked at his table of the English tenses and then he has, and I'll be really honest, it's like, wow. So we're going to be translating this into some sort of English tense. And
Yeah.
what I'm wondering is, in my sort of simple mind, why don't we have here, this tense matches this English tense? Or tenses, depending on situations. And here's how they map, because it seems like we're doing an awful lot of work here and not stating the point very, very, very well. I'm just,
Yeah.
it's hard for me and I'm looking at that. And so at some point, I'd like to go over the English tenses
Okay.
and tell us which
Match them to the
match
Greek.
them to the Greek tenses.
Okay, I
Because I
think I
can't
could.
tell that he actually does that in the book.
Maybe not, but
Eventually, if you can get there, but he doesn't have something that just
Yeah.
shows us that, right?
yeah.
Would that help you? I mean,
I think so.
yeah, I mean, okay.
All right. I'm in the process. Let me show you one of the handouts I gave you. This is something I did a while back on the present, imperfect, and future tenses of the verbs that we've studied up through chapter 22.
Is that one you handed us yet?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
handed it to you.
That's the one you just gave
It's a
us.
handwritten
Oh,
one.
okay, that one.
I've
Yeah,
got them in
yeah.
columns. What I could do is add to that and give the English equivalent.
Well, no, actually, I think what I'm asking for actually is, where's that table where he had the all the English tenses?
Oh, that's
Where here, English tenses, it's on page 427.
yeah.
And below that, he has Greek tenses and aspects. Okay, but to be really quite honest, so I'm looking at this and I've got here what he calls past simple, under which he has I studied, I
Yeah.
ate, I was studied. That's passive.
Passive, yeah.
That's past simple.
Past
So
simple.
that maps, we were just told, to the passive. That's right. That's the passive aorist,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Is if I had a table like that says
I'll see if I can come up with one.
these English statements would be which verb tenses and aspects in the Greek, because now I can look at that and go,
Yeah.
right.
I'll see if I can do that before next week and bring it to you.
That would be great. Would that help you? You see that table on
Yeah,
4
I'm looking at it and
because I'm just thinking, when you say this tense, I'm looking at this and he says past simple, and then he's got active and regular. Well, okay, I'll know what that means. Maybe I'm thinking, and if I think about the English tenses, at least if I kind of had, because they're not named the same way.
No.
He
No.
calls them past progressive, and I don't know if that's a
Past-
common
That's
statement.
same as past continuous.
Well, and I don't know, and I do not know what grammarians in English call them. I never heard of that. That's okay. But he doesn't call the Greek things the same thing,
No.
which makes it really confusing.
Okay, so
here's one
Yeah.
thing, Dave,
I'll try to come
Yeah.
up.
what the brief will help in a small way, I think. Whenever you see the progressive tenses in English, it means that the speaker or writer is trying to communicate
An ongoing,
What
something
was-
that took time.
what was happening as the action was in
In
progress.
progress, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it.
That's the terminology that I learned
Same here.
in school. But they don't teach
No,
English
I
grammar.
understand. I understand all of the usage of this.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember that name.
Right.
And that's okay. I don't know that I don't
Well,
remember it, and that's fine. So if this is the name, but the really odd thing is that in the Greek, and I get it that it comes out a little different, but it seems odd that we didn't just simply give our English speaking students the English names that map to the Greek verb forms,
mhm.
and then make notes where there's some oddities, because,
Yes.
right?
Right, and I will tell you that probably what needs to accompany this is the equivalent of something that they gave us at the Defense Language Institute when we were studying Spanish. Fortunately, they didn't have one, but we did Russian. But in Spanish, someone had published a book called English Grammar for Students of Spanish.
I have a book like that
Yeah.
for,
And,
Wow.
and that's exactly what this book did, is it was like a little brief refresher
Well-
on English grammar and then matched it up with the
So,
Spanish grammar.
Look, it's been a long time ago, but I took French and I took German, and when they talked about the French and the German verbs, they used terms that were common with English terms.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They weren't
I
sort of
think I remember
out
that
somewhere
too.
in, outer space, in a term you've never heard. And then it turns out that aorist is really a past tense thing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, why is that mysterious? I don't know. Sorry.
All right, but are we,
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm like, wow, okay.
so that's my assignment for next week. I'll try to come up
Carl, I
with a
know.
table like
I
that.
give you homework. I'm sorry. If you don't do it, I think I'll try to do it myself, but I think you already have the information.
And you would have really loved my Russian classmates at DLI because they were so aggressive and really wanting to learn this well, that after about a fourth of the way through the course, they had our instructors teach us all the Russian grammar terms. And from that point on for the next 9 months, all of the grammar discussions were done using Russian grammar terminology.
Okay,
I mean, so
okay.
we were talking about Tririli Padesh, Namini Padesh. You know, it's like, okay.
Okay. Well, and
Okay.
that would be fine too, but all right. I'm
Okay.
not sure what kind of terms these are. I don't know if aorist is even a Greek word. So,
It is.
is it really?
It's the alpha, which is the negation.
Mhm.
It's equivalent to our
Okay.
UN
Uh-huh.
on.
Yeah.
And horizo, which we get our word horizon from that. It means defined. So aorist is undefined.
Undefined
Undefined
horizon.
aspect.
Undefined aspect.
Yeah.
Undefined
Oh, I'm starting to
aspect.
get it. Okay, so the.
Which we call simple because it doesn't
Yes.
put any time to it. I mean, it's in the past, but we don't know when, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It could be instantaneous in the past. It could have been a prolonged action in the past, but it's done.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting this in. So in aorist, the or is that first part that we would get from hor, right?
Yeah.
And then the a would be like, we would have an a
On.
prefix on a word
Yeah.
like asexual instead
Ah,
of.
yeah.
That's
asexual.
right.
we
Yeah, we
get
do
that.
that in English.
We
Yeah.
get
So-
that
so
from.
that's- Okay, now I see how it's put together and where it comes from.
Yeah,
And
well, that makes sense.
actually, the horizo, where we get our word horizon from, comes from a verb horao, which means to see, to view, to see. So those are related terms, but the best
Okay.
way the most simplest way for me to think of it is undefined.
That's fine,
A horizon is
But-
a defined point.
Right,
but like,
but I can kind of get now understanding how the A fits in there.
Yeah.
I'm seeing how they.
Yeah.
That'll help me remember it because it links a couple of things
Yeah.
to make a new neural pathway.
They got a name for that alpha. It's called an alpha primative or privative, I think. It's just a negator.
Right.
okay, well, thank you, Carl, for your patience with me.
Sure. Well,
And the other ones are not Greek words. They're English words describing them.
okay. All right, but you get the idea
Yeah.
of an augment. It's
Okay,
on the front of the
Alright.
word, a prefix, rather than at the end of the word.
yeah.
Okay,
why-
then
It's not just called a prefix.
primary and secondary endings, as you saw in chapter 16, there are two sets of personal endings to learn. Primary tenses are defined as those that do not use the augment. So that's why present and future tenses didn't have an augment, because it's not past time.
No, wait a minute. Primary and secondary. Okay,
But the secondary tenses are those that do use the augment. And those tenses are, so far, the imperfect in chapter 22, next chapter, the aorist. Both of those use an augment, indicating past time. Is that understandable?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Carl, I mean, fine, we're using the word augment here. It's a prefix.
Yeah, prefix.
Okay.
But there are other types of prefixes that are going to be used, which are not augments. One of those is what's called reduplication. But
Okay,
don't worry
that's
about
fine.
it yet.
No, that's fine.
But this prefix is an augment indicating past time.
That's fine. I mean, we have suffixes and prefixes in
Mhm.
English, and they're not used for the same things. They have lots of different things. So I'm just saying,
Okay.
okay.
So then we've got the chart for the master personal endings. Primary active and primary middle passive, that's the present tense. And then secondary active and secondary middle passive is the aorist tense. Not aorist, imperfect tense. Primary tenses use primary personal endings and secondary tenses use secondary personal endings. Well, it's an obvious statement almost. You learn the primary in association with the present tense. In this lesson, you'll learn the secondary endings with the imperfect tense. These four sets of endings correspond to the four quadrants of the master personal ending chart. Now, let's turn to page 230, and he's got the whole paradigm of these four sets of endings, or two sets of endings, four different ones. The active voice in the present tense uses the top left. The middle / passive voice in the present tense uses the lower left. The upper right uses secondary active tenses, and that's for the imperfect active. And then the imperfect middle passive uses the lower right set for the imperfect middle and passive. I might not have said that quite
All right.
best way, but
Mm.
you see how he arranges that. And once you learn those four sets of endings, there are no other endings to learn.
Okay.
So much easier to see when it's in color.
In
On
color, yeah. Yeah, because he separates the stem from the augment and from the connecting vowel and from
Is
the
that?
ending.
All right.
Yeah, does he have? Yeah, he's got that on
Yeah,
the
the
second
augments are in
page.
green.
No, here it is.
Yeah, augments are green. The stem is black.
Black.
Connecting vowel is blue, and the ending, personal ending, is red. Yeah, that's a good thing that he did there.
Personal ending is in red.
Mhm.
So there's not a lot that's different. There's a few that are different.
Yeah, he'll go through these one by one and show the differences. All right,
Right.
back to page 226. These four sets of endings are all the personal endings you need to know. All other tenses draw from these endings or some variation. You already know two of the four. Once you've learned the following two paradigms, you'll know all the basic personal endings for verbs. Congratulations.
I'm sorry, where are you?
Page 226 in the middle.
Okay, gotcha.
Now 21.5. One advantage of learning about primary and secondary endings is that when you see a secondary ending, you can assume the verb is augmented. This is a significant aid in parsing and should become a regular part of your parsing arsenal. Whenever you see a secondary ending, confirm that the verb is augmented. But he's going to mention a caveat here in just a little bit.
Because it's easier to see that than it is the fact that the augment's in front. I'm sorry, just
Well,
okay.
he's going to introduce something here
Okay,
in 2110.
all right.
So I'm not going to read through the paradigm. You can do that yourself.
Mhm.
And let's just skip now to page 228. And he gives the paradigm for the imperfect middle / passive, which we see that in this 4-quadrant thing
Imperfect,
too.
active, and dictative. Why was
But let's not get into the details of that just yet. I want to.
okay?
So characteristic of imperfect verbs. Now he's going to say more about the augment. And this is something this is probably the hardest part of this chapter. The augment indicates past time. Well, he said that. Just like in English, the ed on the end indicates past time. There are two different ways a word will augment, and this is getting at what you were just talking about, Dave. Depending on whether the stem of the verb begins with a consonant or a vowel. If the verb begins with a consonant, the augment is an epsilon. That's what we saw. Always with a smooth breathing. Footnote 4. This is called a syllabic augment, since the augment adds another syllable to the word. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
For example, luo is augmented as eluon. Luo had 2 syllables, eluon has 3 because of the augment. But if a word begins with a single vowel, the augment is formed by lengthening that vowel instead of adding another syllable.
Yeah.
Footnote 5. This is called a temporal augment because it takes longer to say the word with the long vowel. Of course, long is a relative term. The time difference between saying O and ah is not that noticeable, but it is present.
So with a temporal augment, it's always going to come out then as a diphthong.
No, not a
No?
diphthong, a lengthened vowel.
No, yeah. It's
And he shows how they get
Megaphone.
lengthened. If the original is an alpha, He shows a backward arrow there.
Like
The lengthened form of an
Eight.
alpha is an eta. The lengthened form of an epsilon is an eta. It's all one syllable and it's not a diphthong.
Okay.
The lengthened form of an omicron is an omega, as you would expect. And the lengthened form of an eta, it can't be lengthened anymore, so it stays an eta. Second set there on the right, the lengthened form of an iota, that doesn't make sense. Yes, that is an iota, because an iota can be either long or short. So the one on the right is a short iota, the one on the left is a long iota, but they look the same. And you remember when we were learning how to pronounce words, he used the English word intrigue. Intrigue,
Yeah,
the first I
it's short.
is short, the
And the
second
one is long.
I is long. So that's how it is in Greek. This one on the right is a short I, iota, and it's pronounced I. The iota on the left is a long iota, it's pronounced E.
Okay.
And the
So-
upsilon is the same sort of thing. It can be either long or short, but I'm not sure there is, it might be versus oo, but I'm not sure. I hesitate to say that. I have to see some, and then the omega is already long, just like the eta was already long. You can't lengthen it anymore. So that's how the vowels lengthen to form an augment. That is, if it's a single vowel. But now he's going to talk about diphthongs. Are you with us okay, Dave?
Oh, yeah. No, this is just painful.
If a verb begins with a diphthong, either the first letter of the diphthong lengthens.
Wait a minute now.
Eucharista.
So in all cases, we're adding an alpha? I'm sorry.
No,
What are we adding?
we're not adding anything, we're lengthening it.
Well, lengthening, but okay, well, I'm sorry.
Well,
But what we are adding is an alpha in front. Right?
no,
No.
no,
And that's all he's taught us so far.
no.
I'm not alpha,
I'll
I'm
give
sorry,
you-
epsilon. We're adding epsilon in front.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
We're adding epsilon in the front.
for a syllabic augment, yes, but not for a temporal augment.
He's teaching us what happens when we add an epsilon to the front of a verb with a vowel. It becomes something different. It becomes eta in the case if there was, so if it was, if by doing that, the augment would have been an epsilon, it becomes eta. If you had an alpha in front.
Hold on, you're
No?
no. If the verb begins with the letter alpha, to make an augment for that verb, you change the alpha to an eta. But if the verb begins with the letter epsilon, you augment that verb by changing the epsilon to an eta.
All right. Never mind.
Did I say that clear enough?
No, it's really okay. We're calling it an augment, but we're not, we're just changing the front. I don't know.
Let's give an example.
I think it makes more sense when you hear it than when you see it.
Yeah.
Because going back to your example of intrigue, even though it's spelled INTRIGUE, the sound, if we were to spell out the sound the way it sounds to us, would be spelled out INTREE.
Yes.
So Carl, it's only this, that in all the other cases, such as contract verbs, which he talks about, it involved a vowel that was being placed in some place, and then it caused a lengthening. It caused a change because all the other cases we're talking about this sort of thing. It involved a vowel that was being put in place and then combined with another vowel to lengthen it.
Yeah.
And you're telling me, no, we're not actually putting the epsilon here, which I'm like, well, fine. I know we're not actually writing it down, and he's not showing an epsilon anywhere.
Okay, I think I can make I think I can simplify it by showing
Yeah.
you, if you'd look at this
Well, no,
parsing chart
I
on,
understand what you've said. I'm just telling you why I was looking and calling it this,
Yeah.
because every other case we've had, some vowel was added, and that's why we lengthened it.
yeah, but this is lengthened for a different reason.
Okay, I'm because we're augmenting it, but we're
Yeah.
not actually adding anything. We're just changing it.
Changing it, yes. Now,
Okay.
I'd like you to look at this, my work on the exercises, because I'll give you some examples of the lengthened vowel augment.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Number two,
Yes, I see.
look at the lexical form, the second to the right.
Right.
Akuo is the verb. It begins with an alpha. Okay, to add an or to make an augment out of that alpha, it becomes akuon. See, the alpha changed to an eta.
So what is happening with number 6?
Okay, 6. Don't look at that one. That's a different thing. He hasn't explained that yet.
All right.
That's why you were confused.
Okay, but number 7, I see number 7,
yeah.
the lengthening from a
But
diphthong.
that's a peculiar verb.
From a diphthong, right?
That's me, and that's a separate case. Don't look at that one. Let's look at
Sorry. So you've shown us the ones that, yes, the only thing in the example is the lengthening of alpha to eta.
yes. Now,
Okay, that's fine.
don't look
Right.
at the parsing chart. Look at the warm-up exercises. Number delta, air canto. That's comes from erkamai, which
Yeah.
starts with beginning with an epsilon. Remember the lexical form?
Yes,
Erkamai?
yes,
Well, that
that's right.
epsilon lengthens to an eta.
Eta, yes.
Air canto.
Mm-hmm.
That's a temporal augment. I think those two examples should suffice. That's how you augment a single vowel.
Mm-hmm.
Right, back to page 229, top of the page C. If a verb begins with a diphthong, either the first letter of the diphthong lengthens. The epsilon upsilon is the diphthong. It lengthens to an eta upsilon. You see on the right side of the arrow. Eucharista becomes eucharistum. Hard to pronounce.
Epsilon upsilon becomes eta upsilon.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, the little table down here below shows us this.
Yeah. So you can go through each one of those to see how to lengthen a diphthong. Sometimes it becomes a single vowel with an iota subscript, like the 3 on the left, or sometimes it becomes a changed vowel, the first vowel of the diphthong. We're not going to have as much trouble doing the exercises because you're going to see the result of the augment just to be able to identify it as an augmented form.
Right.
We're not building the augment.
Right.
We're seeing the augment and identifying what it is. In other words, we're going from Greek to English, not the other way around.
Right.
Okay, present tense stem. The present tense stem is used to form the imperfect tense. Remember, we had some roots that were different than the present tense stem. We're not going to use a root that's different from the present tense stem to form our imperfect.
So the stem for the imperfect is
The
the
same
same as
as-
the present.
That's right. And
Which
that's
is-
why it's put in, his
Okay.
method is to put it in parentheses
Okay,
between the present tense and the future tense
right.
in the vocabulary section. Let's look at briefly at the vocabulary section of this chapter, page 236. Top of the page. No, let's not look at that one yet. Akolutheo, page 235, first one, akolutheo. That means I follow. That's the lexical form. It's present tense. I follow. But, and the,
Where are you?
page 235,
Oh, down in the vocabulary.
yeah, vocabulary, excuse me, akolutheo. The stem, present tense stem is akuluthe. It gives a meaning, I follow or accompany. And then underneath that, we've got the word in parentheses. That is the imperfect form. It's based on the present tense stem.
Wow.
And the alpha got lengthened to eta. That's the augment.
So we actually don't see very many of these in the New Testament.
Oh, yes, you will.
We will?
Yeah. Oh, you mean the word akulutheo?
No, but I mean this
the imperfect?
parentheses, because most of the verbs he gives us don't have this tense. Right? I mean, we had that discussion. That's why this is in parentheses, is
Yeah.
because most of them don't have this.
Okay, well, let's look in the
Yeah,
gray
that's fine.
vocabulary. There are some of them that don't have a form in parentheses. I grant you that. And whether it's most of them, I don't know. But there are several in here I see that do have a form in parentheses. That means
Really?
the ones that don't have a form in parentheses, the imperfect doesn't it doesn't appear in the New
Where is the
Testament.
present, future, aorist,
Oh,
perfect,
no.
active?
He
Where are
doesn't
you?
do it in this chart.
Where are you?
I'm looking in the, well, for instance, page 476 in the,
Are you in the vocabulary?
yeah, the,
Oh, yeah. I
The
mean, we
lexicon
had this
part.
discussion, and it turns out, I mean, I'm like, why would you make these
Okay.
why would you do such a thing instead of just leaving a parenthesis like in a dash like you did on the others? And on this one, if you don't have something in parentheses, it means we don't have that in the New Testament.
that's
form,
right.
Right?
But on that chart where it lists all the verbs that occur 50 times or more,
Wait,
he doesn't show in that chart the imperfect.
you're telling me that
Because,
this is based on the fact that it's a secondary stem, secondary based off the present.
yeah, it's based, say it that way. It's
It's
the imperfect
secondary,
is
it's a
based on,
secondary endings and it's based off the present.
yeah, but the present doesn't have secondary
No,
endings.
no, but this tense
No,
is based off the
don't say
present.
it that way, Dave. This is the way to say it. The imperfect tense is based on the present
On the
tense.
present tense.
It's not based on primary or secondary endings.
No, but it has secondary endings, but it's based off the present tense. Are there any others that are based off a different tense?
No.
Okay,
This is
so
the
that's
only-
why he puts parentheses.
Yeah, and that's why he doesn't list it separately in this table, because
Wow.
you're able to figure it out if you know the rules. It's not,
Wow.
it's not a tense that,
No, it's all right. It's all right. Tell you what, he could really use some help on how to put together a clear guide.
okay, well. this
Right?
is
I
what-
mean, nobody in any kind of communication profession does this sort of weird thing.
Yeah.
You don't make up, the word is nomenclature. His nomenclature for understanding his grammars is so irregular. It's really, really hard to know what's happening.
I think I mentioned early on that, something that I've heard in the military was, I've heard it variously attributed to Patton or Eisenhower or MacArthur. I don't know who actually said it, but he said, never give an order that can be understood. Always give orders that cannot be misunderstood. And that
Oh,
truly
okay.
applies to any sort of communication, and that's something else could
Yeah, it's okay.
take to heart.
I get it. It's just that a good nomenclature doesn't require you to understand the thing you're describing. I'm going to put that backward. Yes, you don't need to understand the thing you're trying to describe and understand in order to understand the rules of the nomenclature. He has built nomenclature that requires you to understand the rules of the thing he's describing,
Yeah.
to know what he's doing in his nomenclature.
Right,
That's backwards.
which is,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Well, are we
Yeah, I get it now.
clear enough to this point?
Yeah.
yeah, we're learning to interpret the book as well as
Yes.
interpret.
Yes, now I finally know why he did his nomenclature this way.
I lost my place. Where are we?
Do other Greek grammars not show this imperfect tense?
Oh, yeah. I learned it, Greek
Okay.
using a different grammar called Machen.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
Just curious, it's not a tense that's unique to him. Everybody talks
no.
about this tense.
oh,
Okay.
the names of the tenses,
Are different by different people.
no, they're standard.
Okay.
The names of the aspects are different.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, and maybe it's not good, but I get it.
Yeah. He changed in this edition of the book, he changed the name of the aspects, and I didn't like the way that happened because it muddies the water.
Well, he's that's okay. What we're dealing with here is someone who's actually trying to change his profession. He's trying to change the world of Greek scholarship. He's trying to he is a what's the word? You have morphologist,
Yeah.
and he's trying to make everybody understand morphology, and he's writing a book that forces you to learn morphology.
Okay. I think we're at 21.11. Present tense stem. Present tense stem is used to form the imperfect tense. That's the best way to state that rule.
Yeah, no, I understand it.
The imperfect form is not usually listed with the other tense forms in lexicons because it is built on the present tense stem. However, if a verb occurs in the imperfect in the New Testament, I have included the imperfect in the listings, but have put it in parentheses. This way, you will always know what the augmented form looks like.
So he's doing it then.
He's doing us a favor.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm writing this here, but you're not gonna find this in the
Okay.
lexicon.
That's fascinating. That was kind of what I was trying to ask.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
The lexicon
Okay.
that you have, Dave, this one here,
Won't have it.
won't have that parenthetical form of the imperfect because
It'll list it somewhere in there if it's in the New Testament. But in its so such as actually, let me just try to look this up. I mean, this is a great education, right? If that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna find a verb. Sorry, give me a second here. I can't type. Maybe I can type the Greek in here if I'm careful. No, sorry. Go to my Greek keyboard and I can. Oh, that's like weird. Okay. Luo, right?
all right.
I get that wrong. Yeah, I'm a dummy. It isn't just lambda, epsilon, omega.
Yeah.
Go ahead and hit search, I guess. Certain, just never mind. Okay.
Okay. But you understand why he's putting it in parentheses and saying that it's not.
Yes. Now I get it.
Yeah.
I think that when he first introduced these things, That would have been a really nice thing to just simply say that.
Yeah,
It's
probably
a form that is derived from the
present tense.
present tense, and other lexicons don't show it, so I'm putting it in parentheses.
Yes. Okay. You said that pretty well.
Yeah.
See what he gives an example of erchomai. The form in parentheses has an eta instead of an epsilon. That's the lengthened. The rest of the stem is identical, but then the ending changes from my to main because it's a secondary ending. So then the next one, elusimi, is a future tense. And the next one is aorist.
Right. Oh, he's got or there. What do we?
Okay.
Yeah.
2112, we ready for that? The imperfect is formed with the same connecting vowels as the present. Secondary personal endings. The imperfect uses the secondary personal endings and he lists them there. I think it's easier to see it on that chart that he has
Yeah.
in the next page.
Wow. Okay. I'm just amazed.
Page 230. That chart there, I think this chart is the most useful one to memorize. If you can memorize,
On 230.
yeah, if you can memorize these
Yeah, that's easier
forms,
to read in color.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
whatever is, yeah,
Yeah, I like
Read it in
this chart
color.
because I don't have to look so many places. If it's on here.
yeah. Well, that you see it there, bottom left,
Yeah. This.
that one. I would highly recommend memorizing that. Because if you do, you'll have all the sets of personal endings. Nice. He explains this in
right.
2115. Calls it recognition. It would be good, I think, if you'd read through that, but it takes time to do that.
I mean, okay. Oh,
Some of them are the same.
yeah, they are. A few are the same. Actually, more seem different. They actually.
Yeah. And some are, if not identical, they're similar enough that you can.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, that's all right.
I'll leave that for you to study at your leisure because it takes time to do that. I don't want to take class time for all of it. Going forward to 21.16 in the book, middle. If a verb is middle only, in other words, deponent, in the present, that is, no active form, it will also be middle only in the imperfect, since both are using the same tense stem. To me, that makes sense. Because they're both based on the same tense stem, they should both be deponent. If one is, the other one should be.
So the thing that seems, I'm just trying to get a grip on understanding how to recognize anything. And it seems that with there's too many things here to memorize, and understanding how to recognize this and that. In the vocabulary, the thing we really got to know is all the stems.
Yes.
We may not remember the root, but actually what we got to really know is the stems. If we can recognize, and some of them are irregular, which means you don't really know anyway, some have different roots. If we know all the stems of the tenses, then we can recognize the verbs because there's so many endings. And how do you recognize a verb? Well, you really have some number of stems, and then some are worse than that, some are even worse than that.
Yeah.
But most of them, if you know the stems for the different tenses, then you'll be able to put together find the verb in lexicon
Yeah.
and figure it out.
Well, that's it. That's why it's called the lexical form, because that's where you have to look it up in the lexicon. And that is the present
Yeah.
tense stem.
Well, but when it's in writing, it won't be in the present tense stem unless it's present tense. So I really need to know all those stems
Yeah.
for all the different tenses. So I'll know what verb I'm looking at and roughly what it is.
Here's an example, gnosko.
Right.
You know what that means, don't you? I know
Right.
that gamma, iota, nu, omega, sigma, kappa, gnosk.
Yeah.
That's the present tense stem.
Right.
Well, the aorist is gamma, nu, omega.
Right.
They got rid of a few letters,
Right.
but they're so similar that G and an N and
Yeah.
O.
Some are less obviously similar.
Oh, I know.
I mean, we have the kappas changing to keys and other strange things going on, and we might begin to recognize to help us know.
Yeah.
But when we look at the verb to learn the verb in our vocabulary, it's like to me the most important thing to learn is all the stems and make sure I know those stems of that verb.
Yeah.
Mike?
And the best place to see the irregularities is in this section in the appendix, which I made you a copy from my second edition book.
Yep. Yep. It starts
Get-
on page
Get familiar with
450.
450.
Right.
Get
450.
familiar with this section
Yeah,
here. You don't have to memorize it all. In fact, the ones that are underlined in that one, the copy I gave you from
Yeah.
second edition, those are the ones that need to be memorized. But as long as you have the lexical form of the verb memorized, you'll be able to find it and then go from there to any other form.
I like aro because it's like the only thing that's consistent is the row.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's in all of them is the row.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because in
There's
certain
something,
senses, the alpha got lengthened to eta.
and I think if I were to spend enough time in the Greek, it would begin to become automatic and begin to recognize all this stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
I've been around it for more than 25 years,
Mm.
and I've been doing it pretty consistently. And I've been translating a bunch of things, and so I've got to where I'm, for most of these verbs,
You know them.
I know them pretty
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I haven't memorized as much as I probably should have, but I can recognize them
Right,
and know where to
right.
find them.
Right.
All right, parsing hint. When you see a verbal form, I recommend the first question you ask is this a present tense form or something else? By doing this, you're really asking, what is the tense stem of the inflected form I'm looking at? Which is pretty much what you said, Dave. The stem is the same if the stem, or is the stem the same as the stem of the vocabulary form I memorized? If the tense stem is the same as the present tense stem, and if there's no tense formative, then it's probably a present. Tense formative, like the future tense, sigma.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Luso. If it is augmented, is it an imperfect? Well, it might be an aorist, but
All right.
if it's the same tense stem as present, then it is an imperfect. If the stem is different, then it's another tense that may have altered the root. The idea is to teach yourself that the verbal root, and whether it has been modified or not, is an important clue in the identification of verbal forms. Footnote 7, I'll forget that. Okay, now we're almost out of time, but I'd like to look at this next page here.
Okay.
Translating in imperfect. Almost everything in the imperfect tense, person, number, voice, mood, behaves the same as it does in the present tense. The only difference is time. In general, the imperfect tense is translated as a past continuous, that is, was studying. Here's an example. I won't read the Greek, but the Pharisees were saying, that's the first word, elegon. You see Lego in there. Leg is the present tense stem. The epsilon is the augment. That's the clue that it's an imperfect. And the omicron nu is the
Mm-hmm.
ending.
Yeah.
So the
right.
Pharisees were saying, that's how they translated. Not, they didn't, you wouldn't translate it, the Pharisees said,
Yeah, that would be wrong.
or
Gotcha.
the Pharisees are saying, or the Pharisees say. It's were saying to his disciples. Next example, ebaptidzanto. There's the augment, and the baptids is present tense stem. They were being baptized. It's because it's a secondary passive ending, onto. They were being baptized.
Right, Jim. Right. Got it. They were being, yeah, it was passive.
Skip
Yes.
that next 21.19. I don't agree with them on that. But now, compound verbs. This is important. In a compound verb, the augment comes after the preposition part of the verb and before the stem of the verb. In other words, you augment the verbal part and not the preposition. The imperfect of kata bino is kate binon. See, you kata is the preposition, and they dropped the alpha, but they augmented the bino part, and it became ebinon. Kat ebinon.
Which is really simply, it looks like saying that essentially the important part is a verb.
That's right.
I'm sorry, what is this word?
Kata bino, it means to go down. Kata means down, bino means go or proceed.
Okay, so this is
The preposition part is kata.
It's a sorry, what kind of, it's a compound verb.
That's right.
So it's a verb, but okay, so the augment is on the verbal part of the compound.
Well said. Yes. It makes sense to augment the verbal part of the compound. The augment indicates past time, and a preposition cannot indicate time. So the verbal part of the compound verb must receive the augment. It's almost like they're two separate words, kata and then bino. So the ebinon is the imperfect of bino. You will notice that the form katebinon, in that form, that the final alpha of kata did not contract with the augment, otherwise it would be kata binon. But and that's how they.
Wait a minute. I'm so sorry.
This is a confusion factor, I think. Just
what? So the words were kata and bino.
Yeah,
bino. Kata and bino. So he says the imperfect of kata bino, and we
kate binon
is kate binon.
Yeah.
And okay, so something had to happen to the alpha.
Yeah, I just think of it as dropping out.
And it dropped out instead of contracting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
That's what he's saying. That's what he's telling us, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's how I think of it.
All right.
You'll notice, no, forget that. 21-22.
Okay.
When you augment a compound verb beginning with ek, the kappa changes to xi. Ekbalo, augmented, becomes exebalon. And I think that's for pronunciation's sake more than anything.
Wait a minute.
Otherwise, you're stopping and starting again.
Yeah, ekebalon.
Oh, all right. Yeah. This is the common thing that happens to kappa.
Yeah.
This is not
it's
unusual.
Just a peculiarity.
Okay.
Now he goes through his morphology explanation, which makes it harder to understand for me. Now, the next page is the three different kinds of contract verbs. Agapao is an alpha contract. Poieo is an epsilon contract. and plerao is an Omicron contract. And the rules of contraction work with all of these when you add that ending, the secondary endings. And you can see how the augment happens there. The alpha augments to an eta because it's not a syllabic augment, it's a temporal augment. But the middle one, oieo, begins with a consonant, so it is a
Yep.
it is a
Yeah.
vocality.
Okay.
And plerao also is a syllabic augment. And then we're yeah, the Omicron nu is the ending, but it contracted with the alpha to form an omega. You see
Okay.
that the
Yeah.
alpha of the
Yeah.
not the first alpha, but the contract alpha, second last letter there, that contracts with the Omicron nu of the first person singular secondary ending, and the Omicron plus the alpha became an omega. Does that make sense?
Looking at agapao.
Agapao.
So its stem is agapa.
Yes,
sorry, is that right?
yes. And
that
that
right?
stem vowel, or I call it a contract vowel,
Yeah, that vowel combined
vowel,
with the
alpha,
Omicron
combined with the Omicron
becomes
became an omega.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just
Yeah,
that. Okay, all right. I think I'm following that.
all right.
Not sure how I'm going to recognize these things. Well, I do. I'm going to see
Yeah.
the eta in front, and I'm going to recognize gop.
Yeah,
Right.
gop.
Gop.
That gop there that's going to tell you.
Yeah, I mean that one's not hard.
Yeah.
All right.
And poi, that'll tell you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
plero.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, that'll tell you. 2124, it wants us to memorize the imperfect of ami. This is a very common verb, especially the third singular, ain. In fact, I think he gave us that long ago.
Wow.
As each year it was. In fact, remember in John 1:1, in the beginning was the word, in arche, ain halagos. That's that word, the imperfect of ami. What are you looking
I'm
for?
looking at the or. So we have amen, amen or emetha.
Oh, yeah, the first person plural form, there's an alternate form. Footnote 13.
Yeah, the few. I don't know why he's telling us that, but okay. Why is he telling us that?
Well, because you wouldn't recognize what it was unless he told you there was an alternate form like that. He says, footnote 13, amen occurs 8 times in the New Testament. The alternate, ametha, occurs 5 times. It's not that often, but you might get puzzled about it.
Why do they have an alternate form of that?
Well, because
Really?
the older Greek, Attic Greek or Ionic Greek or one of those other dialects of Greek probably used one form and another dialect used the other form. And so there are other words that have alternate forms, probably because they came from different dialects. Yeah, regional.
Yeah, like Yankees don't say y'all.
Yeah, we got an alternate form. Yeah,
These guys.
yeah, use versus y'all.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
And then the preparatory use of there, I think you probably,
I've never thought of the Bible having regional dialects included in it. So now I've got something new to come from that I wasn't expecting.
oh, okay.
I'm kind of, you know that it was written by a bunch of, oh, well, yeah, a bunch of Jews who spoke it not as their principal language, and the
Right.
Greek in their area was probably not the same Greek that was in Rome, in
True.
Rome.
And so,
I mean,
so it's not at all surprising given the large number of authors.
oh my goodness, yeah.
Oh.
It was a language that had been around, since Alexander.
Yeah.
He started it kind of.
And you covered, at this point,
The
even
massive
today,
empire.
like a quarter of the world, even by today's standards, much more of the.
It
much
was
larger
everybody
percentage
that was
of
worth
that.
talking to as far as they were concerned.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
given the amount of space it is, I mean, it's not surprising with that many authors over that much time, that you'd have different regional dialects. It's just, I've never heard anybody mention that before,
About regional dialects.
about regional dialects in the original language. And I'm sure you probably encountered that in the Old Testament too, between dialect that first off differed from northern Israel to Judah, as well as probably
Yeah,
the
probably,
dialect that Moses used probably would have been quite different than the dialect that Amos used.
possibly, yeah. I don't
Wow.
know, but
So that's another whole study, and there's
yeah.
a lot of questions about what happened in Hebrew.
Just a couple more things before we go home. There is a little more to this, and I think it's important. This preparatory use of there is easy enough to understand, but the vocabulary, I think it'd be a good idea for you guys to study it a little bit before you try translating. And then there is advanced information on pages 237, 338. This is pretty important, but it's very interesting. I wouldn't worry so much about 21.26. That talks about that unusual verb echo, which means I have or hold. But this exegesis section here, that is really useful and interesting. It's got 5 different ways to translate the imperfect.
Where? Oh, under notes information.
Yeah, there you go, that page, exegesis. I think you'll like reading that. It's good examples, and we'll probably make use of some of those in our exercises. Do you want to just quickly read through that one? Generally, the imperfect describes an imperfect action that happens in the past, progressive or durative, for he was teaching his disciples. That's what we already looked at. That's the basic way to translate the imperfect. But it can also place emphasis on the beginning of the action. The term is ingressive or inceptive. Translators may add the word began to bring out this significance. Angels came and began to minister to him. You wouldn't simply translate it, angels came and were ministering to him. You could, but the context suggests that beginning point.
And would it be valid in that case to say angels came and began ministering to him?
Yeah.
The progressive?
Yeah, that's how I did it.
Right.
Some imperfect actions do not occur constantly, but rather repetitively. That's iterative. A translator can add a phrase like kept on to bring this out. Excuse me.
Okay.
Black screen. Do you guys get black screens and you can't answer it?
No.
This is bugs me. If I press this button there,
You need to just.
I don't know.
Huh?
They'll
That's
leave a
weird.
message.
Don't get the message.
Okay. The translator can add a phrase like kept on to bring this out.
Hmm.
The widow kept on coming to him. Rather than saying the widow was coming to him, she kept on coming.
Okay.
That's the parable, or Jesus' parable of the unjust judge. Or another example, they went up to him and again saying, "Hail." That's when the soldiers were abusing Jesus.
So, or repeatedly.
Yeah, repeatedly.
Yeah.
They
I'm sure why you know,
kept
again and
beating
again.
him.
Okay.
Mhm.
And they were being sarcastic, mocking him. Number 4, other actions occur regularly, such as express.
Carl, I'm looking at that example, and they went up to him again and again. The verb here is went up, right?
Yeah,
Is that what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And why would it be? And they were going up to him saying, isn't that
Oh, wait a minute.
why? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what it is that's got what thing going on here.
Okay, both of those are
It's two of them.
imperfect. Air canto
Right.
is,
So if I said they were going up to him and they were saying,
yeah, you could do that.
I mean, it does carry that understanding, because if they were going up to him and they were saying, it doesn't tell me, it tells me it's an ongoing thing, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
in the
I'm just
past.
not sure why we wouldn't just do the simple thing, but
Well, you
okay.
could,
Right.
but it brings a richer understanding if you combine the ideas expressed in the context with the tense.
Mhm.
They were
Well,
mocking him, having,
yeah, I get that, but it says all that.
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I don't
Okay.
need to.
You don't need to, no. Other actions occur regularly, such as expressed by the English used to, which is customary.
But this is the idea of something that's done habitually.
Yeah, habitually, but it was repeatedly in the past.
Mhm.
Now at the feast, he used to release for them any one prisoner. The imperfect can also describe what a person wishes to do, voluntative, or tries to do, conative, or almost does, tendential. Often it's difficult to tell the difference between these three, and as always, context is a guide.
Now, okay. Okay. Without digging into that whole piece of scripture, I don't recall. Now, at the feast, he used to release for them any one prisoner.
Yeah,
Um,
that
how
was
do
Pilate.
well, wait a minute. Yes, but how do we know it was customary and it's not just saying at the feast? And we would say the simple way here that he was releasing for them one prisoner.
Well,
How do we
that
know
says
that?
nothing.
No, but how do we know that? I'm just asking a question. How do we know that it was customary and something he always did?
I don't know that there's anything that we could say definitely, but that was a custom.
Well, maybe it was. I've always read that because that's what my translation has always said. But my question is, it could have been that and now at the feast he was releasing to them one prisoner.
Right.
Well, it
Here's-
may not
here's
have been
the thing.
normal. I don't know.
There could be ways you would know that are not here. For instance, it may be that in the other gospel, in this particular case, in the other gospels, maybe it does say something about it being customary
Yeah, could be.
explicitly.
Well, it might, and I don't
know.
remember because I know this was true, but I've always believed that was just saying that in the simple form of that verb, we wouldn't know all that
No,
unless
we
we
wouldn't.
knew all
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
And
saying. So there may be outside information in a case like this.
Yeah.
Another thing I could.
well, there
think
may
of
be,
is-
but okay. But in the simple translation, what is the problem with just simply saying, and at the feast he was releasing to them one prisoner?
You can.
I mean, it conveys what the
Uh-huh.
simple Greek says, and if the
Mhm.
context tells me all the rest, I know the context.
So just leave it in the context.
I'm
and
just
don't-
wondering,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
asking a question.
It's a good question.
How do we know all this?
Yeah. But without studying it, I couldn't answer that.
And I guess I'm advocating for trying to understand if, what I'm really asking is there's nothing about this verb and it's just strictly its grammar that says this is what we should do. We're saying we should translate this because of something contextual, but this almost becomes interpretive.
Well, yeah,
Okay. And I'm just, okay, all right.
yeah. You are adding interpretation. His exegetical insight that he had, which we read, is a good example of this sort of thing where you have different nuances of meaning. Okay, well, that's enough, I think, for tonight.
Okay. So we read enough of this or?
I think so.
Okay.
And I think it'd be good to start on the exercises, at least the parsing and the warm-up, and go any farther than that if you have time.
I could wish that I myself were first. That seems subtle. So that word there, that I'm not familiar with it. Carl, do you have?
I'm sorry, what
Oh,
page?
I'm sorry. There's the verb is auk
Oh,
aukomai.
the eukomai.
Does that mean to wish? To desire?
It could be. That's the unaugmented form is epsilon, upsilon. That's where you'd find it in
So
the
this is augmented, which we would think would make it what we're calling continuous past. So if I looked at this very simply, it would mean I was wishing that I myself were accursed.
Yeah.
Which is sort of an odd thing, because it would be in past tense. But if I say I could wish it, it's no longer past tense. It's conditional.
Yeah, well, now there's more to it than just a minute. Eukomai, I think, is the lexical form. Yeah, eukomai. Of petitionary prayer or appeal to God. I pray or I offer prayer or I ask. Or, second meaning, a strong desire for something, want or wish for. Romans 9:3, and this is an example. But, oh, that is Romans 9:3. Yeah. This might be just a minute.
The other examples here are still past tense statements. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not really sure that those differences are necessary to understand what's being said. Such as, I used to persecute the church of God and tried to destroy it. If I read that as I was persecuting the church of God and was trying and was destroying it. Well, all right. And you didn't succeed because you couldn't succeed, but that was what your mission was.
Yeah.
And I don't really have a problem with that, but that's really odd that we've changed what would be past tense to something that's not. I could wish that.
Yeah, that one I can't
I'm
give a good
struggling with that.
explanation
That's
for
really
that.
weird.
But in the language of prayer, we often, you've heard of the optative mood. I think we talked about subjunctive and optative. Well, that's farther into the book, but this sounds kind of like optative, but
All right.
when we say in English, would that I were done with this. You know, that's a wish, a strong wish.
Right.
That's kind of the idea of the optative. It's not the indicative mood. It's not even the subjunctive mood. It's a wish for something that probably won't happen.
Right, which is the reason why our instructors at DLI referred to that as part of the class that they refer to as contrary to fact statements. This isn't the way it was,
Yeah,
but hypothetically, it could have been.
yeah. That's what we study in the conditional sentences. But that's for another day. That's farther on down.
Yeah, it's almost, I'm just studying that and thinking about what it means.
Well,
I was wishing that I myself were a curse. I'm thinking, okay. As opposed to I could wish. And just trying to think about.
all he's trying to do, I think,
Yeah.
is show you different options for how to translate something.
Yeah.
To bring the context into it. And yes, I think it is kind of interpretive. But now we're getting into things that are a lot fuller in meaning than what.
Okay.
Well, could we
Yeah, do we want to say good
turn
night?
off the recording and pray and dismiss?
Well, good night, everyone.
Good night.